title from this week's Radical Media on Substack, which is found at maajidnawaz.substack.com. Israel helped to found Hamas, and all wars are bankers' wars, but peace is still possible. That is the basis for the Radical Dispatch, the latest Radical Dispatch, analyzing events as they currently unfold inside Israel, and encouraging everybody not to fall for the next latest thing, expertise syndrome, and recognize that not all of us understand the Middle East, as well as those of us who spend most of our lives consumed by these analyses and conversations. So that is the topic of today's show, if you like, and the episode that we're gonna do. And I think Osman, you'll be pleased to know that we are live, so we're going to carry on. If you're also able to confirm that, yeah, on your,
I can see that. Yeah.
So that is the show today, and what we ask from all of you before I kick off is your patience, and your patience is particularly important in this context, because what we're witnessing at the moment is what we believe are politically ignorant paid influencers and PR operatives in some cases, facilitated on this platform. This is a tweet or an X, whatever you want to call them these days. So when this platform, I was referring to Twitter at the time, rallying global sympathy for the collective punishment of an entire population in Gaza. The purpose of the snuff video circulating is to whet your desire for bloody vengeance. We're going to ask you all to be patient with us, because our purpose of today's conversation, as you can tell from the text we just showed you, is not to divide. Our purpose is to bring people together. And so it behooves us to begin with this. Of course, everybody condemns the innocent loss of life in all cases, and in every case for all time. That is something we don't feel we are under any obligation to have to bother to throat clear for any longer than the one sentence that I just devoted to that excuse, sort of, or throat clearing or caveating before we begin this particular live stream. You won't be hearing it from Osman, because I exonerate him from having to repeat what I just said on both of our behalves, because our background in counterterrorism speaks for itself, and we don't need to justify how we actively fight those who believe in taking civilian life. We don't need to elaborate any further. And so what we will not be tolerate through the course of these conversations is to be gaslit by those who disagree with our analysis and forecasting. Take it or leave it. It's not something which we will force down your throat. If you don't like it, don't watch it. We will not be gaslit by those simply because they disagree with what we're saying, by pretending and framing their disagreement as if we are somehow sympathetic to terrorism. Those very same people, to draw an analogy, in the spelling equivalent of fighting terrorism, they are unable to even spell the word. Don't take that literally. That's an analogy to the actual practical work Usman and I are still engaged in on this side. So we won't tolerate lectures from those who don't understand the very essence and nature of this work when it comes to the analysis that we're about to present. And that's the last you hear on that throat clearing. As I said, you won't be hearing it from Osman, because I've exonerated him from even having to bother about repeating it on his side. I'm sure he understands I speak for both of us when it comes to that. So let's begin with this point. Hamas' attack on Israel last Saturday requires no further introduction. Condemning the glorification of civilian death should be the baseline for any conversation on this issue from any side. And the problem here is, alas, it is not. As this tweet by Beltrue indicates, Israel's defense minister has ordered a complete siege on Gaza. They will cut power, block food, fuel. This will be catastrophic for the 2 million inhabitants. Gaza medics told me it will be a disaster for civilians. Supplies, power, water already low from the existing blockade. Now, what I will proceed to do is demonstrate that the loss of innocent civilian life is bad in all cases, but what we're witnessing right now is the multiple platform-based online psychological operation in a military sense of the word, and I mean that specifically, to try and influence perceptions to justify what's about to unfold or is unfolding as we speak. And that is the collective punishment of the people for Gaza for an atrocity committed by a terrorist organization. And this kind of moral equivalence and justification that they did it to us so we can do it to them is fraught with so much danger. And we're going to witness the danger unfold. And the cycle of violence is never ending. And so Jake Shields got it right when he said this. Israel said they will unleash hell on Gaza and the citizens needed to clear out. The only problem with this is Gaza is basically an open-air prison and the residents aren't allowed to leave. Obviously, Israel needs to respond. But telling civilians to leave a city that they aren't allowed to leave seems ridiculous. Now, the importance, and thank you, Jake, the importance of what that's MMA fighter Jake who's been on Warrior Creed before. Now, the importance of what Jake said there is in the context of what Netanyahu has said here. This is the Prime Minister of Israel official account, which means it's Netanyahu's office voice. And he says all of the places which Hamas is deployed, hiding and operating in, that wicked city, we will turn them into rubble. Now, first of all, before I carry on, this is no way to describe the world's largest refugee detention center, to call it a wicked city. These are some of the most vulnerable people on the planet. They are homeless refugees living in a mass camp. Generations born there. This is what the Gaza is. It's a camp. They are blockaded in the south by the Egyptian military and blockaded in the north by the IDF. So your language is important, sir. And to call it a wicked city is a dehumanizing of people who live in that city because they are not wicked. They are humans like you and us and all of us. But it continues. I say to the residents of Gaza, leave now because we will operate forcefully everywhere. And back to that point. They're not allowed to bloody leave. Where are they meant to go? They aren't allowed to go south. Egypt doesn't open the border, and they aren't allowed to go north because Israel doesn't open the border. Where else are they able to go? It is literally north and east is Israel, south at the Rafah crossing is Egypt, and then west is it's sea. Where do they go? And that is the problem, that now the aerial bombardment is going to begin and the psychological operations online are designed to numb your empathy in this situation and say, well, they should not have harbored Hamas then. The only election in that territory was the election held after Ariel Sharon withdrew from Gaza and Hamas, I think now 2014 was the year. That is over a decade ago. Sorry, so it was before that. I think 2009, sorry, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's over a decade ago that Hamas has not held elections in Gaza. It is not the people of Gaza's fault. And yet they will be collectively punished by these aerial bombardments justified by Netanyahu. And the reason why those lack of elections are important is because I'm already seeing online the response of people, well, they shouldn't keep electing terrorists then. There have never been elections in Gaza since Hamas took power. And when Hamas took power, they were dragging Fatah members behind pickup trucks on ropes to make sure there was no opposition left in Gaza. So you cannot blame the people of Hamas for a situation when, the people of Gaza, correct myself, for a situation when this is what they live under. And who was it that funded the founding of Hamas in the first place but Israel, as we will come to? And so there must be a level of shared responsibility for the crisis in Gaza, especially considering that the Israeli forces, the IDF themselves, admit, and we will show you the receipts in roughly 2-3 minutes, admit themselves that they were responsible for the founding funding that went into Hamas when Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, the blind sheikh, was still alive. May Allah forgive all of us. At the end of the day, I don't want to judge anyone too harshly in that history. What I want to say, at the end of the day, it's very clear that Israel and Egypt, because of their backing of the Muslim Brotherhood, they all share a moral responsibility to what's happening in Gaza, and to simply blame the people of Gaza because they find themselves surrounded by the black magic, which is all of this, what they do to the people every day with blood sacrifices. To blame the people of Gaza for this situation is beyond the pale. And so Netanyahu, as Jake Shields stated in his tweet, made it very clear that the collective punishment is on a way. He didn't use that phrase. That's the phrase we're using to describe his view that the people of Gaza simply need to leave if they want to escape the punishment. And this is how we're summarizing what's going on, as we showed you before. It's why we showed you this slide. You will witness politically ignorant paid influencers and PR operatives facilitated on this platform, rallying global sympathy for the collective punishment of an entire population in Gaza. The purpose of the snuff video circulating is to whet your desire for bloody vengeance. That bloody vengeance will come in Gaza and in the form of aerial bombardment. And here is another thing to keep in mind at this point as we continue speaking. You will notice that Hamas snuff videos seem to able to circulate freely online, while the voices of all those who oppose COVID mandates and all war in Ukraine remain heavily shadow banned, because across all social media platforms, by the way. Because Build Back Better cannot happen without some good old-fashioned destruction coming first. The important thing to remember in what's going on is, at the end of the day, they will not mind which side you take online when it comes to what's going on in Gaza and Israel. As long as you take a side and you are prepared to dehumanize the other for the side that you take, it's mission accomplished, because we're talking of classic globalist divide and conquer tactics here. And I'm going to come to all of how and why with receipts in a second. And in that context, it's important to show you our first receipts for all of the very heavy and serious allegations I know I'm making on air live in a live stream. And I appreciate Rumble allow this conversation to continue. And we appreciate the fact that we are able to speak our minds in this way, because we know many other platforms have decided that this kind of conversation is too heavy for them to tolerate. But the first question to ask is, if Mossad, as they bill themselves, are the most intelligent intelligence agency in the world, the smartest, the most prepared, and they have what is known as the most fortified border crossing on the planet, the Gaza crossing into Israel, how on earth is it that with all of the cameras and the electronic fences set up on that border, that the Hamas forces in their hundreds were able to cross over and take as many hostages as it appears to have been that they did? And the best way to understand this is with voices on the ground. So allow us, first of all, to present a video by one Effet Fenixon, who has been a political commentator from Israel and has been very active since the anti-COVID mandates debate, and has now, interestingly, and subject I encourage, decided to comment on this particular conversation. And when you see this video, you'll understand precisely why. So let's listen to Ms. Fenixon from Israel.
Serious questions for me, anyway, about Israeli intelligence. What happened? 2 years ago, there was a successful deployment of underground barriers with sensors to alert exactly on these kind of terrorist breaches. Israel has one of the most advanced and high-tech armies. How come there was zero response to the border and fence breaching? I cannot understand that. Personally, I served in the IDF 25 years ago in the intelligence forces. There's no way, in my view, that Israel did not know of what's coming. A cat moving alongside the fence is triggering all forces. So what happened to the strongest army in the world? How come border crossings were wide open? Something is very wrong here. Something is very strange. This chain of events is very unusual and not typical for the Israeli defense system. With the recent normalization efforts of Israel and Palestine led by Saudi Arabia, I wonder whether a prisoners exchange deal is something that could only be seriously considered by Israel if a shocking event like that happened. Is it a possibility that only with Israel hostages it can be justified to release dangerous prisoners from Israeli prisons?
Now, allow me to, at this stage, reassure everybody. I know the lady personally. I've met her personally. She isn't a concoction of anyone's imagination. She's a real human being, former IDF intelligence, stating very clearly, it appears something to be very wrong. Direct quote from her video. After that video was published online to the world, it's not that I have private access to that video. She uploaded it on her social media accounts herself. It was followed by other videos such as this one.
הסרטון הזה כמה שיותר, כי תקשיבו רגע, אני שירתתי כסמב"צית חי"ר במהלך מלחמת צוק איתן, אני שירתתי באוגדת עזה, כל השירות שלי היה תומכת לחימה בזמן מלחמת צוק איתן שעזה הייתה באוגדת עזה. תקשיבו לי ותקשיבו לי טוב, אין מצב בעולם שיכולה להיות כזאת התקרבות לגדר, אוקיי? מבלי שאנחנו לא נדע מזה. התצפיתניות יושבות בבונקרים 4 שעות, הן לא יכולות לעשות ככה, הן מול מסך. לא יכול להיות מצב, שום מצב, שהיו מעירים אותי בלילה על יונה, על חסידה שהתקרבה לגדר, על מקק שעבר מתחת לגדר, היו מקפיצים את כל הגזרה. איך נכנסו עם טרקטורים, איך נכנסו...
And as you see, basically a second video confirming what you saw initially from Efrat Fenixon in the first video. And then these 2 videos and reports of indeed the absolute failure of the Israeli security forces response for 6 entire hours, as is reported there by Efrat Fenixon. For 6 hours after these attacks began, there was no response coming from the IDF side. It is almost, look, from our experience, and, you know, as I say, we're not going to talk about having to validate that because we know who we are. From our experience, that is just an absolutely implausible scenario to unfold for 6 hours for there to be no counterterrorism response whatsoever. And these suspicions were then shared by somebody as notable and somebody known to both of us, Usman, somebody as notable as the BBC security correspondent and Al-Qaeda bombing survivor, Frank Gardner, who in his article for the BBC, How Did Israeli Intelligence Fail to Stop Major Attack from Gaza? Makes the following, this as you say, see, is only from yesterday, makes the following observation. Dozens of armed Hamas gunmen were able to cross the heavily fortified border between Israel and the Gaza Strip, while thousands of rockets were fired from Gaza into Israel. With the combined efforts of Shin Bet, Israeli domestic intelligence, Mossad, its external spy agency, and all the assets of the Israel Defense Forces, it is frankly astounding that nobody saw this coming. Right? It continues. Even the AP has made this precise observation. What went wrong? Questions emerge over Israel's intelligence prowess after Hamas attack. And from that article, you'll see the following. Again, it is basically reports that the Egyptian intelligence said that because Egypt serves as a mediator between Israel and Hamas, had spoken repeatedly with the Israelis about something big without elaborating. I'm reading. He said Israeli officials were focused on the West Bank and played down the threat from Gaza. Netanyahu's government is made up of supporters of Jewish West Bank settlers who have demanded a security crackdown in the face of a rising tide of violence there after the last 18 months. We have warned them. An explosion of the situation is coming, and very soon, and it would be big. But they underestimated such warnings, said the official, who spoke on condition of anonymity because he wasn't authorized to discuss the content of sensitive intelligence discussions with the media. Well, lucky for you all, Warrior Creed exists because we're discussing with you precisely this. And you may be wondering now then, what on earth is going on? And let's make it clear for you that the allegation we made at the beginning is now substantiated by the observations on the failure in the intelligence, is that indeed we believe it is highly likely that Mossad did have an indication that these attacks were coming and decided not to act. Now, you may be shocked by that and wonder why would they decide not to act. And we will assure you that Mossad acts on the basis of what they think is in the greater good for them. And so if they, with this calculus, which is a calculus that, by the way, before you're too morally shocked, most human beings use if they're not guided by the source. And that is the calculus of utilitarianism. And so before we start judging anyone, this isn't about judgment. I exit that debate. So does my bro, Usman. We don't live our lives on that utilitarian basis. We feel that it's more honest and honorable to stay and remain connected to the source at all times, good and bad, when the winds blow hot and cold. And we will just carry on for our principles regardless. But most people don't live their lives like that. So most people actually live their lives in precisely a way, in a smaller scale, obviously, but in precisely the way that it appears that Mossad has decided, in my humble analysis, right? This is obviously something that it appears to us to be the case, that Mossad has decided to turn a blind eye to these attacks for the purposes of what? For the purposes of the utilitarian greater good objective of re-invading Gaza and absolutely demolishing Hamas. The blood sacrifice in the middle were those poor and innocent Israeli civilians who appear to have died, and obviously now Gaza civilians who appear to have died in the process of that grander objective of reclaiming Gaza as a physically occupied territory. It appears that Netanyahu's people have taken the view that Ariel Sharon made a mistake withdrawing from Gaza. It appears they take the view that that only emboldened terrorism and Hamas, and that instead we need to reoccupy Gaza and once and for all purge Gaza of Hamas, which is why this operation, as they are telling us, is going to be a lot worse than what we already see, and that they are preparing us with their online propaganda so that we're not too outraged to be ready to observe a lot more in this operation, because their aim is to entirely uproot Hamas from Gaza. And they needed a precursor to be able to do that. And it appears that that's why they turned a blind eye to an operation that they likely knew was coming. And if that sounds too unpalatable for you, I understand. We understand, because you may just be waking up to how evil the world truly is. But try and understand something, that this is how it's always operated. And I said earlier on that we will come to return to the subject of that. If you think that's bad enough, then try and digest that just like the CIA funded the founding of Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan to fight the Soviet Union, Israel was involved in the founding funding for Hamas in the days of Sheikh Ahmed Yassin in Israel and in the West Bank and Gaza, sorry. And that is, if you think it's bad enough turning a blind eye to a Hamas attack, then how bad is it being involved in the founding of the organization in the first place? This is how the world operates, folks. And we're telling you all this in order so that we may all not be scared when we start having a raising of consciousness in understanding all of this and start looking at the world differently, because it will make us look at ourselves differently and hopefully ground us better to source energy, as opposed to thinking that the idols that we held so dear in earth are from where we derive our morality and our perspectives. And so let's go to the receipts. Here is the Wall Street Journal. I want to reassure everyone, when we make, again, because I know what I'm saying is quite shocking to people, when we make such grand allegations, we come with similarly grand receipts so that everybody can see that this isn't madness. What you're hearing from Warrior Creed is simply truth, because we resist the democratization of truth, as it says on the tin, quite literally on our social media pages. So if you see here from the Wall Street Journal, how Israel helped to spawn Hamas, that's an article there by Andrew Higgins. You can see it there, the date. 2009, June 24th. And here's an extract from the Wall Street Journal article for you. Hamas, to my great regret, is Israel's creation, says Mr. Cohen, a Tunisian-born Jew who worked in Gaza for more than 2 decades. Responsible for religious affairs in the region until 1994, Mr. Cohen watched the Islamist movement take shape, muscle aside a secular Palestinian rivals, and then morph into what is today Hamas, a militant group that is sworn to Israel's destruction. So it is not really something which is too much of a secret. And then so really the question is then, if that is how Mossad operates for the utilitarian principle of the greater good, and if they did justify these attacks by turning a blind eye to them for the purposes of reoccupying Gaza, then the only question remaining in that analysis is, why would Netanyahu want to do that? And that brings me to the following, because this is from Al Jazeera today, or yesterday, I should say. Fighting Hamas puts Israeli protests on ice, but political divide remains. The surprise attack may have united Israelis for now, but anger at Israel's government will only fester, analysts say. And what we're saying here is that Netanyahu had, as those of you inside Israel, and we send you our condolences to you as well as the people inside Gaza. It's not here about taking sides. But those of you inside Israel, as you know, Netanyahu has never been more unpopular than this moment. In fact, perhaps the country's largest ever political protests in history have been occurring against Netanyahu during this entire period, throughout COVID and up until now, because of his attempted judicial reforms. Netanyahu desperately needed an external crisis to take the internal and domestic eyes away from him. And what better in such a situation to raise the ratings of a failing prime minister than war? Unfortunately, again, I apologize, that's how the world works. War is profit and it's ratings for politicians who rely on those to stay in power, to do the bidding of those whom they serve. And that is what we're looking at here. Netanyahu needed this war to make sure that as it states here, that the protests inside Israel stopped, the protests against him. And they have stopped, which is obviously the case because that's what would happen. But that is why you're seeing online propaganda, because they are preparing you to tolerate atrocities and war crimes committed in the name of self-defense, which incidentally is exactly Hamas's reasoning too. This will initiate a cycle of terrible violence in already pre-cooked and divided societies globally. You must refuse to play. Have a look at what I'm quoting there, because that was in response to this news that Israeli Defense Minister orders siege on Gaza. There will be no electricity, no food, no fuel. We are fighting human animals and we will act accordingly. So if you think my tweet is too harsh, please remember, I'm responding to the Israeli Defense Minister using language like human animals. Now, some of you will say, yeah, but he was talking about terrorists. You can't say that because the context here is they're blockading the entire Gaza. So if you're speaking in the context of there'll be no electricity, no food, no fuel, i.e. for all of Gaza, and then you say we're fighting human animals, the sentence we're fighting human animals is designed and uttered to justify blockading all of Gaza, which implies by definition that all of Gaza contains human animals. It isn't that difficult. You know, I'm not some great Aristotelian logician. I mean, it's just there in plain writing for you all. And that is why it's important to understand if you think my words are too harsh at the top there, they're preparing you to tolerate atrocities and war crimes. It's because we know that war crimes and atrocities require as a prerequisite the dehumanization of the other. It is the very work in radicalization that we've been doing in counterterrorism for so long. We've trained people in how to not only stop people with bad intentions doing this to others, but also we've helped people move away from this kind of behavior. Now we're witnessing it on nation levels, such as when they try to double Trump supporters as terrorists. It's the same thing happening again with justifications in the name of security. And that is why we are warning everybody, because some of those who saw through 9/11 got played by COVID. Some of those who saw through COVID got played by war in Ukraine. Some of those who saw through war in Ukraine are getting played now by what Hamas has just done. Because the Arabic word for human, remember, is insan in Arabic. It's derived from the root nisyan, nasiya, to forget. And this is the problem. We all forget what we've just lived through. We've just lived through cheering for war in Ukraine. And now we are wanted to cheer for war in Israel and Gaza. This is the case, and we're forgetting again. Only just after learning that the war we cheered for in Ukraine culminated in an actual Nazi SS officer receiving a standing ovation in the Canadian Parliament, with Zelensky and Prime Minister Trudeau standing and clapping like seals for an actual Nazi surviving officer, a still alive one from World War II. That is the culmination of falling for the psychological operations of cheering for war in Ukraine. The Azov are a Nazi brigade, and we were expected to clap like seals for them. But now because that film, that movie has run its course, we are being told to switch the record, as you see there, flip the cassette. Now we are meant to be war hawks and cheerleaders for war in a different part of the world, where probably we're expected to continue remaining without heating or eating, as in some cases domestically for many people in Europe who are living below the poverty line. I'm not the victim in that case, but there are many who are. And at the end of the day, alhamdulillah, but at the end of the day, there are people who are struggling, and we're expected to continue sending money for war abroad, and we can't even look after our own people in this situation. So that's what we're dealing with, and that's why we're dealing with it. And if you think why we're dealing with it is that beyond the pale, then remember, as we've just demonstrated, that is precisely how these nations operate. With the utilitarian greater good principle in mind, they're prepared to make sacrifices along the way, which is why we believe Hamas has walked directly into a trap. And as this tweeter says, Hamas needed a victory and Israel needed a war. Correct in both counts there. And all we've added is, yes, astute observation. We'd add that Hamas probably walked directly into a trap. And that trap was their demolition because of their overreach, a bit like the pharmaceuticals industry overreach in COVID. Hamas overreach here has led to the Israeli disproportionate over-response as well, which isn't very good for anyone, frankly. Hamas has walked directly into a trap. And Iran is standing accused by the Wall Street Journal, though Iran officially denies this. But Iran is standing accused of helping to plot the attack over several weeks. Now we're going to broaden it out for you and tell you what might really be going on. Why would Netanyahu want to reoccupy Gaza? To what end? Because, of course, you can't have peace with Israeli military occupation in Gaza by definition, where you don't need to look beyond Iraq and Afghanistan to understand what happens in occupation. So what is Netanyahu really playing at? And to understand that, we need to go a bit wider and understand the broader regional context. And that is, don't forget that it was the Abraham Accords that up until this particular attack were causing cautious optimism among certain quarters that finally peace in the region could be within grasp in the form of the recognition of a Palestinian state. And how that could come about, this is, by the way, from Haaretz. Let's read this first. It says, Temple Mount Al-Aqsa is waiting for Saudi Arabia's Mohammed bin Salman, the ruling crown prince of Saudi Arabia. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman hasn't hidden his desire to be the guardian of all of Islam's holy places, including the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is causing tension with Jordanian King Abdullah. That article is confirming the following, and that is that, the Abraham Accords were dangled in front of Saudi Arabia as a way to grant everybody what they want when it comes to the Middle East and as a result, have peace. And that is, of course, in the context of the UAE and the Israel peace deal in the form of the Abraham Accords. Saudi Arabia was being billed as next. And if Saudi Arabia made peace with Israel, it would have been truly groundbreaking historically, because it's something that the last time that was attempted was in 1981 in Egypt, when Sadat tried to make peace with Israel. He was assassinated. Egypt came under emergency law under Hosni Mubarak, and that emergency law remained all the way until they imprisoned me under it. That's the last time peace with Israel was attempted in the Middle East. So Saudi Arabia attempting peace with Israel would be an incredible thing if it were possible. And of course, what MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, would gain from it is suddenly becoming custodian of the three holy sites, Mecca, Medina, and Al-Aqsa in Al-Quds, Jerusalem, not just the two holy sites in Mecca and Medina. So there's a big carrot there for MBS, whose ego, I imagine, would incredibly desire such a historic and grand title. I mean, I cannot describe to many of you what that would mean for him, but what it would mean for anyone really in that sense. It's a very grand title in grand civilizational senses of the word. So that's a big carrot for MBS to make to enter the Abraham Accords. And meanwhile, of course, Israel craves normalization. And that's why it appears that these attacks may well have jeopardized all negotiations on normalization with Israel. This is, of course, unconfirmed reports, because these kinds of reports are difficult to confirm. So I read this one with that caveat that these are unconfirmed reports, that Saudi Arabia has informed the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, that it is ending all negotiations on normalizing relations with Israel, reports the Israeli newspaper, the Jerusalem Post, echoed by the Saudi media outlet, the Saudi Post, published in the United States. So at the end of the day, if that is what's going on, then we must understand that if it was these attacks, if their purpose was to break up the Abraham Accords, to scupper the possibility and dream of peace in the region, then we must understand something. That's why I say Hamas walked into a trap. We must understand that there is a way forward out of this. If we look at this with a cool and level head, there is a way without feeling that we have to pick sides and start warmongering and cheering for more bombardment on all sides and only increase the profits of warmongers through the military-industrial complex. There is a way forward if we understand what the adversary in this instance is seeking to scupper. We can remain focused on what needs to be a way forward to preserving a peaceful resolution to war in all cases. Now, in the case of the Middle East, the prerequisite to that is understanding what each side wants. As we say, Saudi Arabia wants to be a regional economic and Islamic powerhouse. Now, Iran, of course, wants something. Iran wants an end to all sanctions, including her nuclear capability. Now, Palestinians obviously want something. They want a state, that goes without saying. And Israel wants normalization. So when you understand what all sides want, you understand that peace is possible. How would it be possible? Well, if we deal with the situation that we find it in now, as opposed to how we wish the situation were, we will probably find within a couple of days that Israel controls effectively Gaza. So we find ourselves in a situation that there is a huge amount of negotiation that is going to need to be done for Israel to withdraw its military forces from Gaza, Hamas to release its hostages, and so on and so forth. So you could consider this move as an Israeli move to increase the strength of their hand before serious negotiations begin between Saudis and others on whether or not the Abraham Accords can go forward. And in such negotiations, each side always aggressively increases its hand for the purposes of being able to compromise by releasing certain things and yet keeping their core vital interests preserved by these concentric circles of defensive hands that they've increased through decisive action. So this particular incident does appear as if all sides are simply seeking to increase their hands in pending negotiations. And that's why I say peace is possible, but you have to get out of its way. You see there. How is it possible? Well, as we say, there's a lot to negotiate, but ultimately, if you think about it, you could actually theoretically, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but I'm saying this is theoretically certainly possible, that if you look at what all sides want, you understand that at the end of the day, all sides could potentially get what they want. If we granted the Palestinians a state, the Iranian objection would end. Now, the Iranian objection would end. Saudi Arabia would then get what they want, which is regional economic and Islamic recognition. The Iranians would get what they want, which is the end of sanctions, because now they're at peace with Israel. They could develop their peaceful nuclear capability if the Palestinians got a state. And in return, if the Palestinians got a state, Israel could get what it wants, which is normalized relations with the region and therefore trade, peace, and stability. So there we've spoken you through how actually peace is indeed possible, but it requires somebody to move the pieces. But those pieces cannot be moved if all of us are picking sides, which is why those who cannot resist hating on you for refusing to play are high on this very same divisive drugs as those who hate on you for picking one side or the other side. You must refuse to pick a side, because we cannot make sure that that happens where all parties, including the Palestinians, get what they want. Palestinians get their state, which means Iran's objection ends. If Iran's objection ends, it stops warmongering, which means sanctions get lifted, which means they're allowed to develop their nuclear capability. There's already peace between Iran and Saudi Arabia. China has already made sure of that. Saudi then enters the Abraham Accords. It gets what it wants, which is regional recognition and to become the custodian of the three holy sites, therefore becomes the Islamic powerhouse in the region. And Israel gets, as a result, what it wants, which is normalization and recognition in the region. But all of that is dependent, as I said, in who's playing chess. And right now in Washington, D.C., we have a senile man playing chess, which is why this problem cannot be fixed until Washington, D.C. is rebalanced. The balance, the alignment of the forces need to return to the United States of America. And I'm going to conclude on something that's going to sound a bit mystic to you all, but I'm going to assure you that based on everything else I've just said, this is very real to me. I've just concluded on that line that the realignment needs to return to U.S. politics before the roadmap to peace that we've just outlined can occur in the Middle East. That realignment, unless it occurs in U.S. politics, unless a rebalancing occurs in U.S. politics, no other rebalancing or realignment can occur throughout the region. But thankfully, there's a symbol of realignment coming on the 14th of October, when the moon and the sun will be in perfect alignment to such an extent that there will be visible in the sky a ring of fire around the moon and sun alignment, because the moon will be from its furthest place from Earth in front of the sun in a solar eclipse, presenting the black sun phenomenon, a ring of fire, a perfect alignment of the moon and the sun and the Earth, when the moon and its energy is the furthest from the Earth, which means the end of ice and coldness and death and a return of warmth, because eventually what's going to happen is a physical realignment, as we've just been saying. Because, as I said, this is the bit where I say what I'm going to say sounds a bit mystical considering everything you've just heard, but I'm saying it's very real. And how that's very real is what I've just described to you there. The black sun is only visible in the United States of America. That realignment is literally physically only visible in the United States of America this coming October the 14th, and in the Americas. Basically, it's going to go through the North Americas. That's where the realignment is needed. So the solution has got to come from there for peace to be possible. But for the moment, what we're going to encourage everybody to do is understand the situation properly before opening our mouths and refusing to pick a side in the globalist divide and conquer. Because if you do that, what we'll end up with is civil strife used as a pretext to further increase the surveillance state across Europe and the US. And reprisal attacks, terrorist attacks could occur across European cities if this is allowed to continue in Gaza as well. It's why we end up with precisely what we want. If we want peace, we'll end up with peace. It's why it's not rocket science. If we end up picking sides, we'll end up with war. But I don't think we fully realize what war means. Only children rush to war and very few men survive them. Osman.
And what we've got now, Maajid, is we're in a situation where each side is claiming victimhood. Yep. So we've got the aspect there where, poor old Israel is being attacked by the Palestinians again.
Yeah.
But the point is with this that you've got to ask. I think the main points that have got to be underlined here is, first off, the point that was made earlier that Hamas is a construct of Israel. Now, I want to separate, and we always do, we separate the current Israeli administration from Jewish people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because what we end up with this is...
And of course, our Jewish brethren know that. There's plenty of our Jewish cousins and brethren who are very well aware of us.
Yeah, and we've done the most work on that side of things. Do you see what I mean? And still continue to do that work. And the point is,
not whether they like us or not, because it's not for anything other than the right thing to do.
Yeah, for love, because it is when you know look, if you know the Jewish community, there's a certain flavor that you love. Every community has its flavor and its tranquility that when you've sat there in that community, you're part of that. You feel that welcoming. That welcoming embrace among the community. Yeah. So I'm not talking about that, and we're not picking sides here. What I'm talking about is an administration that on one side with Netanyahu and the military oppressive approach that he's got, that actually, remember, goes hand in glove with Hamas. And guys, if you study geopolitics properly and historically, you're going to see the same echo of this on a wider scale. So if we look at Hamas as a jihadist movement, look at jihadism.
Yeah, and Afghanistan and what happened there.
Afghanistan, the Red Mosque in Pakistan, the fact that Hamas learned suicide bombing from Hezbollah. But the other big question that comes up here as well is who trained these guys in the West Bank to even execute what they executed, even if a window was open for that. Do you see what I mean? Because what we've got with this is we've either got a level of, and this is a valid question as well, a level of incompetency with the IDF, because it's one thing with the IDF killing kids throwing stones. And I'm talking, and once again, I point this back to the administration's methodology, not towards people. And I'm saying here that it's very, if we talked about the time of the Soviets, no one was getting, if you accused the Soviets, you weren't accused of putting the Russian people in with the Soviet administration. The same way that I'm talking about this administration.
Yeah.
Whereby
it's the same. You could criticize the invasion of Iraq with Tony Blair and George Bush and not be anti-British.
Or if someone's shaking in their chair right now, Maajid, with rage because we're not picking sides in that way, guys, if you've got rage towards this, which from our perspective, our methodology is every victim represents every other victim. That's why we're pointing out what's wrong here.
Yeah.
Nick Robertson from CNN said to me that he saw, when he went to Gaza, he described it as an open air prison. Yeah. So what we get with this is there is a big issue there with dehumanization, and the language that's being used demonstrates that. The weapons that have been used before with white phosphorus and all of that demonstrate that as well. But then we have to be uniform when we look at geopolitics and say the same thing's happening in Yemen as well, from the side of the Saudis.
That's why I said, when I was speaking and I said, this is how Mossad operates. And I said, but don't be too judgmental. It's how everyone's operating. Well, that's how the world works. And it's sad when you realize that, because of course it can be depressing, but it doesn't have to be. It can also be liberating.
But the thing is here, Maajid, this is the question mark now. So could it be the overconfidence as well? So what we've got is who trained these guys in the West Bank, but also the overconfidence of a defense force that hasn't been tested but has been hyping itself as the world's greatest army, but has only been fighting kids throwing stones. Yeah. That's one question mark there, because then you've got to ask the question of if Israel is, and this was talked about at the time of the Balfour Accords and this is where the blame falls back on us as British from that perspective, that even with the forming of Israel, there was the idea of having the Ulster in the Middle East. So what they did with Northern Ireland, where they had a divide and conquer perspective going on, where you had Protestants in a sea of Catholics.
Oh, bro, I've seen the wall. There's a wall that you can still see that goes through the city of Belfast and still closes in the nighttime and opens at the daytime, because it's now seen as something that everyone's happy with.
Yeah. Well, the thing is here,
crazy.
That was, if anyone looks back at history, it's there. The words are literally there saying that Israel will be like an Ulster in a sea of Arabs. Yeah, that the Jewish state would be like an Ulster in a sea of Arabs, because of this idea of Arabization going on, which we saw with Syria. Now, the point that I'm making here is there's the next part that happens, which is the interesting part with normalization. Yep. Even with the Crusader state, at a certain point, the Princess of Aleppo went against the European Crusaders because she became Middle Eastern, because the culture had become Middle Eastern. Now, you know as well as I do, Maajid, that individuals in Israel now aren't the ones that invaded it.
Yep.
Yeah, these are people that are waking up and they're like, well, we've got nothing to do with this.
They're Israeli, like we're British, we're born here, and we don't have the baggage, good and bad, of having lived through partition, for example.
Yeah.
And a colonial period. We were born just after that period. It's a different kind of baggage, but it's not the living baggage of that period.
So we have to separate them from, then you've got what represents this administration, which is the settler movement, where it's where it is a colonizing, invading movement. Now, the problem is I'm not validating any of this, because from a problem-solving perspective, I have to look at what's happened in Yemen, look at what's happening in Gaza, and you, like I said, with the whole of the Middle East.
Yeah.
The whole of the Middle East.
Yep, precisely. It's why we need a regional lens. It's precisely why we can't get just everything revolves around this one topic. No, it has to be in a regional context.
It has to be in a regional context. And you see, with normalization, what people don't realize, this isn't about forgiving the sins. Like there's some like people. It's a very interesting position that people give themselves, because you got a lot of people screaming blasphemy right now, unless you're taking one side or the other. Because when you come with a viewpoint of, well, actually, if normalization happens, what would happen with Israel is you'd see the integration of it into the Middle East, and Israelis becoming Middle Eastern.
Yeah.
And what I mean by becoming Middle Eastern is like the lady that was speaking a moment ago in Hebrew.
Yeah.
Anyone hearing that, if they didn't know what language she was speaking, might think that she was speaking Arabic. Yeah. And the fact that they eating kosher, eating hummus, eating flatbread, it's all there's.
I've been there many times in every north, south, east, west bank, Ramallah, all the way through down to the border of Gaza. It's a Middle Eastern culture. It's like it is it's almost kind of Greco-Turk in its food and approach to life, Mediterranean kind of customs, but it's very Middle Eastern. But obviously the language, expression, and behavior is more Arab than even Greco-Turk.
Yeah, and this is the threat now, isn't it? So exactly the point that Maajid's made there about bargaining chips. Because the most obvious point with this is that when you go to a negotiating table, if you've already got your lines drawn, if I go into the hairdressers with a shaved head, or I've already got a short back and sides, the £5 that I pay to him for the haircut isn't really doing much. But if I go in there and I've let everything grow out, I go, look, I need everything lined up, then that £5 gets me more. Now, it's a crude analogy, but what's going to happen now is Israel gets to grow it out, in the sense of it gets to take over land and have that negotiating currency, which allows this administration to keep its face for its supporters. And from Hamas's perspective now, the big question mark with this is what happened there on the ground. And from the point of view of, you see, at the grassroots, this is what people don't understand. They look at this maybe from the strata that they're sitting within. At the grassroots right now, this dehumanization, these words like animals, and also, depending on which side of the fence you're sitting, depends on what footage you're seeing.
100%. There are people that are in disbelief at what Hamas is doing to Israel and are unaware that there is precisely the same footage Israel doing to Palestinian Hamas prisoners, like stripping them naked, beating them with blood all over their naked bodies. And people don't know that it's an inversion. They don't realize exactly the same thing they're outraged exists for the other side.
But the point is with this, that you see, the problem we've got with this regardless is that there's a build-up all the way through. And when we look at the Middle East with this is why I'm keeping it uniform in that statement. The Palestinian oppression doesn't just, that you've got Israel, but then you've got the fact that even the Palestinian diaspora in other Middle Eastern countries is still treated as a Palestinian diaspora 50 years later. The same as the Afghans in Pakistan. And the problem with this is we've got this keeping alive of victimization that, guys, if we creep back a little bit into the end of World War I and the population movement that happened then, if people went back in time to there and talked about holding on to victimization from that period, and we're talking about with Greece, with the Turks, with the dismantling of we had so much population movement happen that if you have holding on to victimization, you get this intersectionality, which is then preyed upon by those people that want that while they're dealing with you as in your intersectional identity are creating that globalist roadmap.
Yeah.
Because
divide and conquer.
And even this like normalization in the Middle East is because things are moving towards the Middle East. Yeah, the wealth is moving towards the Middle East, the city building, the infrastructure, the liberalization, the more welcoming outlook that you're getting with Saudi Arabia now. Yeah, and if you're coming from a conservative, well, I was going to say conservative, but yeah, like the Protestant Muslim perspective, yeah, but the Wahhabist perspective, once again, you might be jumping up and down in your chair, but you have to understand that that's only 100 years old itself.
Yeah,
that conservative perspective.
But by the way, allow me to just say something on that. And this is forgive those of our viewers who don't follow precisely the strand of this particular anecdotal interjection off the back of what Osman just said, because it's very kind of intra-Muslim debate about what the Wahhabi perspective is. But just to comment on what you said, I take the view that because of its being such a superficial and shallow phenomenon in the context of our tradition, that there isn't really too much to worry about. It will wither away because it is very, very superficial historically compared to the weight of the true tradition that it claims to be riding the coattails of. So ultimately, it doesn't even have the strength when it comes to facing off against the tradition. And the most it will achieve is be used, hopefully, for the aims, the good aims of the tradition, to further the direction of ma'ruf, or goodness, as the tradition would describe.
The thing is, we'd have to go into a history lesson right now to go into the structure of this like reactive ideology that has been worked upon from the perspective. So the end point of this jihadism and having groups like Hamas there, where you can push a button, and you get a certain response. And the reason I'm explaining that with them, Maajid, is because once again we've got the subversives jumping up and down.
We've seen
all over the internet.
But from all directions.
From all directions. But the interesting thing is here, it's like the subversive industry. And what I mean by this is groups in whose interest it is to have the separation, to be in this place where it's us and them. When we live in a time where you've got supersonic nuclear weapons. Yep, supersonic nuclear weapons, where basically someone can push a button and it will get past your defensive grid. It's like literally like within a couple of minutes, isn't it, Martin?
Yeah.
That the thing arrives. Yeah.
Well, now they are supersonic, and they travel through low space, so you can't stop them.
Yeah, you can't stop them. Yeah. And in that period, you want your groups.
Yeah.
You want to talk about intersectional identity, but what this does is it keeps the masses occupied while you've got all of this movement of you've got the economic migration going on right now with the capital into which we've seen away from Europe now with the with the dismantling of the European states. Germany was the richest economy in Europe. Now it's how many companies have shut down up there? How many people? And you're going to see a European diaspora. Maybe we get to a point where people in Syria are saying, "Why are we getting Germans on the streets of Syria?" Because what we're getting now is we're at that stage now where you have got that movement, and you have got this thing where There's a reason MBS is building.
Right, yeah, certainly Dubai is an example of that.
Yeah, Dubai. And there's a reason MBS is building the Star Wars city in the middle of the desert. That thing's being built.
Yeah.
There's a reason the normalization is going on. There's a reason why people can now go to. You don't have to be Muslim to jump off a train and get off in Medina and walk around Medina. The only thing you can't do is go into the mosque.
Yeah.
There's a reason why all of that is happening.
Yeah. And it's why, by the way, it's what I remain optimistic. I'm not, when the events like these tragedies unfold before us as we're commenting on them, a lot of people become depressed, and you see stuff that is depressing in their commentary. But I don't think there's a need for that, guys. If you remain grounded and connected to the source, then you will realize that all of this happens in its own time.
Yeah. But the problem with this is, Maajid, it's like, what is one victim worth?
Yeah.
Because the issue now is, are we going to see that frustration turn into something else? Because having this conversation with colleagues of mine who are still active in the counterterrorism sphere, one of the other points that was brought up is, have you seen the troop movement with the Serbians at the Kosovan border? It's very interesting what's going on. From a geopolitical perspective, it looks like the old issues are going to prop up. So what ends up happening is the simplistic mindset becomes reactive at this point. Yeah. Remember, the root of terrorism, or the root of the jihadist terrorism, was frustration. Yeah, let me show you what it feels like to be a victim. Yep. So let me go and blow up people at an Ariana Grande concert for you to feel what innocent little children dying feels like, because obviously the ones in Gaza or the ones over here are animals. Yeah, a very simplistic logic of us and them, which you have to ask yourself, how does that happen for people that are if you're sitting in one place but relating to people somewhere else, rather than seeing it all as your circle of concern, your circle of influence, and curing that issue by spreading peace.
Yeah, because it's as simple. What you're saying is literally as simple as the following, and I mean this literally. Applauding the death of children in one case is applauding the principle of the death of children in all cases.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. It doesn't get any simpler. And ultimately, those that applaud the death of children in one case will end up finding themselves in an instance where they are lamenting the death of children in another case to the very people that they applauded initially when the other death of children, the first one, occurred. And the problem then is that's where you have people's misery falling on deaf ears on either side, because no one's able to empathize with the other. It revisits us all. So the principle is simply, let's stop applauding the death of children in all cases.
Yeah, but you can't dehumanize. You can't keep playing this game of dehumanization where we go back to World War I and it's fight the Huns. Remember, that was in Europe, Maajid.
Yeah.
Fight the Huns. So in Britain, you've got posters about fight the Huns, talking about the Germans. Yeah. Now, once you start studying history and you say, well, actually, it's this period now where we've got the most amount of labeling and taking on of labels. Yep. Which means the idea of your reality being relative to you. Yeah. So relative to you, but the relativity itself is something that you take on with the garment that you take on of whatever intersectional group that you belong to. So that garment that you take on comes with the free gifts of this victim. This is the victimization that you've had. Yeah. So if you're black, it's the whole transatlantic slave trade. Yeah. Now, or if you're gay, it's
Stonewall and the entire
Stonewall and all of it. And all of it separates you into these different labels and different groups. Like we've got right now where yeah, a friend of mine put out a video on Instagram, and he had to take the video down and put an apology out, and say, because he didn't see at the bottom it said Muslims are barbarians. So he took the video down, he put an apology up, and he said, I apologize to everyone who saw that video. My best friend's Muslim. Yeah. Now the point is with this that people are moving so simplistic.
I know you're talking about.
So simplistically, Maajid.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same thing we had when we were training the New York Crime Commission. And I pointed out to them that they had posters up in the New York Underground, which said, which had a picture of the Mufti of the old Mufti of Jerusalem sitting next to Hitler. Yeah.
Haj Amin al-Husseini.
Yeah. Who was, once again, not from a traditional background, was part of that Protestant movement that we talked about. So for those that are more informed, they'll understand the reference that I'm making. And by the way, I'm not a broadcaster, so that hence I go off on tangents. So the point that I'm making here is the fact that they had the poster up in the New York Underground, and it said, "Fight jihadism, support Israel."
Yeah,
yeah, and it made it. It was very simplistic messaging, which, if you're looking at it, it says, "Oh, Islam is like Nazism." And when I explained that to the room, and I said, "Oh, can you justify this poster being up?" And then one of our colleagues from Mr. Soros's group was there as well, and he explained how he came from an Arab background and grew up in Chicago, and seeing that poster made him feel othered. Yeah, seeing that poster up in the New York Underground made him feel othered. Yeah. It's very simple, guys. This thing is like this game that's being played with people's minds. This thing that creates a reaction in you because you haven't yet had the experience of being among those people, whoever those people are. Yeah. Like we said, Maajid, it's like some of the darker situations that we've been in, who are the people that have been alongside us, has been our Jewish brethren.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So
it's the thing is,
this is why what we say is in a sense it's so candid with everybody, because we know who we are. We have nothing to hide, and we know our friends in every area know that we are simply speaking our minds, and that's all we're doing here. It's known, and it's known about us from the beginning of our work. It's what's got us into trouble so many times. But fact is that if we're tolerated for that, that's all we're asking from people, and that is to allow us to speak our minds, because we don't do so from a place of maliciousness. We do so from a place of love, with the intention of attempting to demonstrate that these problems are not insurmountable. We don't have to live in fear. The very reason we are able to speak our minds is because we try not to live in fear, and we are confident that our speaking our minds shouldn't indicate to any of our friends from any background that it means that in any way we're passing or casting judgment on them. We are simply trying to help them understand what we believe is a more stable and grounded approach to addressing life's problems. And the utilitarian principle of the greater good will inevitably fail because it falls in on itself. Inherent within it for world affairs is the idea that you have to, for the greater good, make sacrifices. And the problem is those blood sacrifices that are made to further a geostrategic agenda. You're playing with some very dark magic. and it comes with consequences. I once said to somebody, if you, we as all children, follow me in this analogy, folks. Don't think I'm getting all too mystical on people, because I tell these stories to make a moral point, right? And I use analogies, right? So, we as all children have these memories of children, being daring in sleepovers and saying, hey, should we try the Ouija board? I mean, I grew up in Essex, and it was a common thing in those days. A 45-year-old and anyone else of my generation remember, it was one of those naughty things kids did. I recently had a conversation with an adult, and I said, look, you've got to be careful with something. If you think you're going to summon demons to do your bidding. Again, remember, I'm thinking metaphors for a moment with me, yeah? If you're going to summon demons to do your bidding, it comes at a cost. And that's the point I'm making. It never comes free. No demon will do your bidding for free. That's the point. So if you apply the principle of the utilitarian principle of the greater good, in the process of which you make sacrifices for the greater good, blood sacrifices for the greater good, quote unquote, then it will come at a price, a cost. It's never free. And that's what we call spillover. It's what people call collateral damage. It's what people call mutual radicalization. So reciprocal radicalization. It cannot, the consequences of that blood sacrifice do not stay they are not contained simply to you achieving your utilitarian objective. Yes, you achieve your utilitarian objective by riding the coattails of the blood sacrifice for the greater good, but the blood sacrifice's power doesn't just stay there. It doesn't just lift you to your utilitarian greater good objective. Its power, the concentric circles that come from it go outwards in other uncontainable directions too. That's why we call it reciprocal radicalization. I speak in these analogous terms to take the sting out of what I'm saying for people so they can understand that this isn't the way to proceed. Take it from people who know that this idea that these blood sacrifices are worth turning a blind eye to so that we can achieve overall aims comes with consequences which you cannot contain. And that's the problem with groups such as the Afghan Jihad morphing into Al-Qaeda, morphing into ISIS, and the rest is history. And that's what I mean. It's something which is, it takes a life of its own. It's a very dangerous, dark game to play. And so what we're trying to do is encourage people to realize that it doesn't have to be this way. For example, do not pick sides in this situation. Recognize it's not just about Hamas and Netanyahu. That if you zoom out, you realize there's a regional game at play here that is far larger and greater than any one of us individually, or in fact, all of our listeners combined. Because we're talking of regional powers and superpowers and civilizations and civilizational forces through history moving in a moment of great tectonic plate shifts geostrategically. When times like this happen, think World War II. When times like this happen, this is effectively a World War III moment. When times like this happen, multiple nations choose to settle their scores with multiple other nations all at the same time. Let me explain why that happens. Because if nation A and nation B, let's say, for example, if the USA and Russia, follow the example, are currently squaring off in Ukraine and in Syria, for example, then what happens in a scenario like this is nation C, say China, looks at nation A and B fighting and spending all their treasure in the war in, say, Ukraine, and says, oh, that's interesting. While they're distracted over there, let me settle the Taiwan issue once and for all. And that's nation C doing it with nation C as well, because, of course, Taiwan thinks they're China. So nation C makes a move on nation C, to be very diplomatic about it, while nation A and B are fighting over there. And if you think that can happen with one example, think of that multiplied by all other nations on the planet. So that's why these things all happen at once. Whether it's Modi remilitarizing the Kashmir conflict at the time that Ukraine happens, at the time the coalition government in Afghanistan fell and the Taliban took over, at the time that the war in Yemen is closed and dealt with by the Iran-Saudi peace accord brokered by China, whether the war kicks off or is forced to shut down, all of the scores are traded all at once in times like this, because it's the opportunity to act. And that opportunity to act will sometimes mean starting a war, or it will sometimes mean stopping a war, but it will all happen together, which is why history will happen in the moment of a few weeks and months, very concentratedly, and then again, nothing will happen for many decades, and again, the cycle repeats. This is one of the periods of history. It's called the fourth turning. What we're trying to do is break down for people how and why all of this happens at once. It feels like time is speeding up for everybody, which, by the way, as you know, Osman, is one of the prophets, Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam's prophecies for getting towards the end times, and that is that time will speed up.
But the thing is, behind this, Maajid, is people need to, if they look behind what's going on, look at when a country gets dismantled, where do the contracts go? Yeah, where do the rebuild contracts come in? I think there was with Iraq, they had 2% of the rebuild went to McDonald's. God knows what they were going to do. That must have been one hell of a.
Well, a lot of it's money laundering. Ukraine for sure is, with FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried.
Exactly, and this is the thing. You've got wealth hoarding, the likes of which there has never been in the history of mankind. Yeah, and when that is happening, look at where the power players are. They're not moving around from the perspective of nation states. Hence, even the importance of America. Yeah, because previously America was America. Now what we've got is when you've got Joe Biden as the president, and then the guy in the skirt who's in the army, the trans army sergeant.
It's a mess. The whole thing's the US. Is why I said it's a mess at the moment. You know, they used to say, bro. Sorry to interrupt you very quickly. They used to say, if America sneezes, the world catches a cold.
Yeah,
I'm saying if America right now has caught COVID, basically. So
but Margie, you got to remember, I was there. I was there at West Point with General Abazain, Vinnie Viola, with all of these guys, and you're there, and there's a nobility there.
Yeah,
and you're looking at it, and you're.
Yeah, but they're as disgusted as we are.
Yeah, the ideal of America, and I said that to him. I said, look, when you look around the room right now, you've got someone from an Arab background, some from an Italian background, some from a Native American background. Said the ideal here is something that if people see that internationally, if that was actually brought to fruition, it's something good. Yeah, that traditional ideal. Yeah, but then what we see with this is what Kennedy talked about: the dilution of that ideal, the corporate interest creeping in. There's this invasion of First they talked about the military-industrial complex, and then we talked about the pharmaceutical industrial complex, but really the capitalism and the monetization of the space that can't be, because it needs expansion. But the other thing that happens is that's fine if you've got wealth distribution going on in a correct way. And I'm not talking about communism here. I'm talking about a certain model of distribution.
Yeah.
But when you get hoarding going,
we're talking about a fair and free market economy, which is mixed.
A mixed
economy, but a fair economy, which allows for trade, and people are able to,
which leaves the corner shop and
fair exchange,
and the independent baker, on your corner, so people can grow up the way we grew up, where it was, you used to have to go into a corner shop and go.
Bro, I get you. People aren't eating bread. They think they're eating bread. They're not. Most people in the cities are not eating bread. They're eating a chemical concoction sold as bread. It should be made illegal to call it bread. It's not bread. It sits on the shelf for 4 months without molding. That's not bread. I buy fresh bread. I grew up eating fresh bread. My mum made fresh chapatis at home. I will guarantee you, and every Pakistani knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you can't be it.
A roti goes bangy after 3 days, maximum 3, because on the third day you have to basically put it back on the tawa with butter and try and get it soft again. That bread goes hard within 1 day. And the second day you eat it, it's already not as good as when it's fresh. You buy a fresh loaf from the bakery and it lasts 3 days. 4th day, it goes a bit hard. That bread you buy in the supermarkets is a chemical concoction sold to us as bread, and it sits on the shelf for months.
Yeah, and this is the thing. The monopolies of this is the issue with this, that anyone who's watching sees, you see the independent shop come out, and you see, so say the independent coffee shop.
Yeah.
So what was it, 2 decades ago, you had independent coffee shops, and then all of a sudden you see the Starbucks turn up, the Costas turn up. Yeah. So anything that makes money then gets monopolized and swallowed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the problem with this is once you start understanding that, and you understand that, oh, is China the enemy? Because I can turn up in China and get Big Mac.
Yeah.
And I can turn up in America and get, and you start turning up in each place, and every single place is uniform. Yep. So,
like in Demolition Man.
Yeah, like in Demolition. So stop looking at the puppet and understand what the real hand is. Yeah. Because you're getting mixed up in, oh, it's a frog. No, it's a dinosaur. No, guys, what we're seeing here is you're seeing a very specific movement of capital and influence that's moving across. And yeah, the question then becomes, is Israel still going to act as a satellite, or is it looking at its own independence? That's another aspect, because it was a satellite state for the US, the same way that you could say NATO has been a satellite for the US. But what we're seeing now is the US itself
is exhausted from supporting such foreign adventures.
And it's sad to say, are we seeing the power move out of the empire?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you have to remember that when we get to the aspect of capital interest rather than national interest, the national ideal. And me and my friends always talk. Yeah, we always talk about Maajid. Yeah, England.
Yeah.
Yeah, goodness for goodness sake. Yeah, the idea that concern for your neighbor, saying hello on the street, giving up your chair, giving up. There was always a level of concern that was universal. That was always there within England. Yeah.
John Cornwall, man. John Cornwall, Allah bless him.
Yeah.
John Cornwall.
John Cornwall.
Yes.
John Cornwall, Sean Greenough.
It's before our show was getting tens of thousands of views, man. But it was the legendary
one of the best Muslims you'll ever meet.
Where is that show? Who's got the video of that show? Do you have it?
You know what? I think that shows. I've got that. I think that's
where is it?
I think it's there on this hard drive, Maajid. That place.
You've got the whole show, yeah?
I hope it's all there. Yeah,
I'm hoping you lost it, man, because I don't think I've got it, because they booted us off YouTube, didn't they?
No, I'm hoping it's all there.
At the time, that episode it wasn't on Rumble, was it?
No, that was one of our Getter ones, wasn't it?
Yeah. So maybe
Why don't we get John? Why don't we get John on again? Do a John Cornwall special.
No, but that show was something. I want the original. You could.
I've got it. I'm just saying to you that just in case
people watching it, let's just confirm.
Yeah, let's get
off air that you've got.
We'll have this conversation off air.
Yeah. Anyway, listen. Before we go, because we're about to run out of time, allow me to make a reminder to everybody. Today's episode, as we said at the beginning, is based on this article from Radical Media, which is found at maajidnawaz.substack.com. It's called Israel Helped to Found Hamas, and All Wars Are Bankers' Wars, but Peace is Still Possible. What we've hoped to do for you all through the course of this particular episode is to demonstrate how Israel helped to found Hamas with heavy receipts, while also leaving you with the optimistic and realistic hope that peace is still possible. So, we're not here to make you depressed. We're here to talk you through reality and demonstrate that there's a way through it as well, as long as we maintain our integrity. So this episode is based on that Substack. Go to, for the written version of this, go to maajidnawaz.substack.com to read it with the receipts and all the links so that you can check it all out for yourself. Don't take our word on this. You can look at all the receipts yourselves. That's how we like to do it, because we encourage critical thinking, which elevates consciousness. So that's why we're saying go to the articles yourselves and check out all the links. The other thing we'll ask you to do is this: Warrior Creed is released via Resistance Radio on Radical Media for the premium members who pay to subscribe. Now, many tens of thousands of you are listening to this live. This work is only possible for Usman and I through your contributions. Just so you're aware, we, both of us, not just me, in the famous case of LBC canceling me, but both of us have foregone economic opportunity. We are both counterterrorism professionals. I don't say that lightly. I have met more heads of state that most people know the names of and advised them specifically on counter-extremism policies. So Usman has done the same, both with military and inside prisons with the most high-level counter-terrorism convicts in this country, in the United Kingdom and the United States. Both of us have. So we are people that have the ability to work professionally in certain contexts and foregone all of that for the purposes of talking to you directly, because we believe there's a better way to do things by staying connected to our principles, our values through the source. So what we'll ask you all to do is help us help ourselves and you as well by supporting us. So go to Radical Media and subscribe, please, to the premium member service so that you could subscribe to the Resistance Radio, which is the all audio content on Radical Media, which includes this show in its podcast version so that you can listen to it in your own time. But also includes the Radical Show podcasts, also includes behind the scenes access to events when we hold them, and finally also includes the premium Radical podcasts, such as the 3-hour-long ones we did with Dr. Tess Laurie, we did with Dr. Sam Harris, and we did with Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, one of the original signatories to the Great Barrington Declaration. Those 3-hour long form conversations with notable public intellectuals are only available to premium subscribers of Radical Media. And I'm making this direct plea to you all while our show is increasing in its viewer figures, because I want you all to please understand that we have foregone opportunity to connect with you directly. It requires you connecting with us directly. So please do, if you are able to, subscribe to the premium service on Radical Media. Right now, it is, as Usman, I hope you don't mind me saying, it is supporting both of us continue doing what we're doing by allowing us to try and turn this into something that can sustain itself. We want to do this work for you and be independent so that we're not beholden to the corporatist media. It means following this show and building the numbers here so that the people at Rumble realize this show is worth sponsorships because you like what we're saying and it's subscribing to Radical Media on Substack. The direct help to both of us will be by following this show, because Usman and I are partners in this particular show on Rumble. And of course, as I say, from my side of things on Radical Media, that's something which we'd also encourage you to do. So thank you all for your tuning in every week. And Usman, I'm going to throw back to you and say if you have any last words.
Go back through the show, and main points to take on are the points that Maajid was talking about with the chips for negotiation for normalization. It's a very, very simple point, a very simple point to take on and to understand what's going on right now. The other question marks that we left you with are, were these guys trained from an outside perspective? We're on a war footing from the perspective of Russia, with Russia in Ukraine. So is there something that's happened there from the perspective of Hamas? Were these guys trained, and is there outside help there that has come in for them to be able to achieve what they've achieved? And does it also demonstrate this idea of this overconfidence in the IDF being, or the Israeli military capability being so strong that because being someone who's from the fight game, you get a lot of talkers. They get tested, it's a different thing. Do you see what I mean? And there's almost an element here of, yes, you might have the alarm bells going off when a pigeon hits the fence, but if someone's planning something, then they also know that the alarm bells go off when the pigeon hits the fence and plan around that. Do you see what I mean? So, especially now in a time where we've got the democratization of warfare. Remember we talked about this, the democratization of warfare, where the idea of even the nation state army in terms of technology is something that when you start looking at it, look, the Ukrainians were able to stop a Russian convoy using drones, motorbikes, and remote control weaponry. Yeah, the Ukrainians. Yeah, we're going into a different stage of what people are capable of in terms of warfare now. Yeah. And remember, we've seen that movement with this once again takes us back to a US point again, Maajid, that when we see that happening, then you can see why the idea of the nation state is being negated, why we're moving beyond that now. Yep.
All right, folks. Well, listen, I'm looking forward to seeing this. Watch out for this. This is this Friday. Okay, everybody. Because it says the 14th of October. The date today is the 10th. It's in 4 days' time. If you can see it, get an opportunity to see it in the US. Don't use the naked eye because that might damage you, but maybe use some glasses. Don't look at it directly. But it is, I think, this Friday across the North American continent on the east and south. You'll see it's south, traveling up southeast like that. Of course, Osman, you know, we're reminded in our tradition to offer a prayer to the source in thanks and honor when we see such beautiful alignment in our cosmos, and to remember that all power resides therein with the source and not anywhere else, in terms of where we might be tempted to vest it in through a disconnection, but it remains with the source always. There is only one. And so we're reminded to make that conscious remembering during moments like this. But it is a phenomenon, a beautiful phenomenon to behold, and it won't happen again until, what was it, Usman? It won't happen again until 2040 something, wasn't it? 20.
Oh, but the
for a very long.
I can't keep up with one. There's some that's a few hundred years, then there's like decades, isn't there? So
all right, well, that's it, and that's all for us on Warrior Creed this week. We'll see you next week, next Tuesday, same time, 3 p.m. UK time, 10 a.m. EST, live for our Warrior Creed live stream on Rumble, and then, of course, released exclusively to premium members of Radical Media on maajidnawaz.substack.com. Until then, it's been the Radical Maajid Nawaz, and my brother, as always, the infamous Usman Raja.
We're about to witness the strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength. Street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge. Quick service announcement brought to you in part by Warrior.